Well, let's bring in our weekly journalist panel now. Joining us are Robert Fife, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail, Tonda MacCharles, Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star, and Joël-Denis Bellavance, Ottawa Bureau Chief for La Presse. Nice to see the three of you.
Nice to see you.
So listen, we just heard Jagmeet Singh there talking about consequences, and really this is not the first time we heard from the NDP leader this week. If you look at the reports, they seem to be growing very tired of their pharmacare negotiations with the Liberals. Are we witnessing the end of the supply and confidence agreement, Bob?
No, he's playing us.
Okay.
He is absolutely playing us and the public to be able to say at the end of March, look what we got. And boy, we were really being tough and we were threatening to break this up. But if you talk to the Liberals, they say this agreement is not in danger. We're going to we're close to an agreement with them, and there are basically going to be 5 or so particular types of drugs that are going to be covered, which is an important thing because these are drugs that would cost a lot of families a lot of money. So the NDP will be able to claim, look what we got from the government. But the supply and confidence agreement is not in danger, and they are not in a position to force this government into an election to begin with. They are in serious trouble in large parts of the country where the Conservatives are nipping at their tails, so to speak, and would probably win those ridings. So it's good politics for them to try to make it look like we're really being tough here, but I think he's just playing us.
If you listened to Justin Trudeau on a Toronto television interview on Friday morning, he said, completely confidently, we're going to have an agreement on pharmacare by March with the NDP. It's perfectly underway. I'm certain of it. And furthermore, he said, you know, the deal is working and we're not going to have an election before what he said was probably another year and a half. So, you know, those are two completely opposing views of what's going on. And I would side with what Bob said, that there's no way that they don't come to some kind of agreement, maybe limited at first, maybe scaled up later by March. Even if this deal does fall apart, let's just take Jagmeet Singh at his word that they're going to pull out of it. The NDP, many of them have assured me that they will likely keep supporting the Liberal government on a case-by-case, vote-by-vote basis, because I don't think that they are ready for an election, although they will say that they've paid off their debt, they're financially able to go into a campaign. But I don't see that happening.
Well, and also, you know, it's important to note as well, you know, we've had minority governments before that have operated without any type of agreement, without a supply and confidence agreement. So what do you make of these kind of threats that we're hearing from Jagmeet Singh?
I think those are empty threats that would have, because if they were to be executed, they would have huge consequences for not only for the Liberal government, but also for the NDP. As Bob mentioned, the NDP would be in danger of losing seats in British Columbia, where the Conservative Party is very, very much strong. And the image that came to mind when I heard Mr. Singh do that was like a pressure cooker, you know? There's a lot of pressure within the caucus, you know, to get out of the deal from some quarters. So you see the lid going like this, but I don't think it's going to hit the ceiling. It's going to stop before it goes too hot. So that's the image that I got. And Mr. Singh, though, is, you know, keeping, repeating those threats. He was in Montreal today. He made those threats on Monday and then answered questions on Wednesday. And I think he's going to keep doing it until, you know, something happens, and then he'll be able to claim victory. But nobody has any interest in going in elections right now except the Conservative Party. Yeah. And the Bloc Québécois doesn't want an election. So if the NDP gets out of that deal, you'll see I think the Bloc Québécois came to the rescue to the Liberal government in some manner to avoid an election.
An interesting point you say about pressure both inside and outside the party, because New Democrats seemingly are far more uncomfortable with this agreement than are Liberals. Yep. But listen, let's move on to another topic here, because it's been a week since Danielle Smith unveiled her proposed transgender policies in Alberta, and we've seen the Prime Minister react strongly to it. Pierre Poilievre being pushed as to why he supports Danielle Smith in this, and in fact, this week he talked about his support for puberty blockers. Is this issue a potential pitfall for Pierre Poilievre as he tries to cash in polling numbers into actual votes in more moderate parts of the country? Is this a potential pitfall for Pierre Poilievre?
A potential pitfall for Pierre Poilievre, yes, to some extent, but also for the Liberals. This is a very divisive issue, and it's one I hope the politicians kind of stay out of, because It's complex, it's highly personal, it's something that should be left to families and physicians to work out. And what bothers me the most about this is that if you remember the truckers and people who didn't want to have COVID and these vaccines in their bodies, and they were saying, you know, we should have control over our own bodies, and the state shouldn't have no involvement in that. So who's out there doing this? Daniel Smith and now Pierre Poilievre. Although, in fairness to Poilievre, he kind of got put into this. He's not going out looking for this, but he did say what he had to say, and he's supportive of her. And you know, I just worry about this because this is sort of the kind of stuff we've seen so divisive in the United States, this cultural wars, and she's jumped onto it, and he's fallen into it. I mean, look at her. She was with Tucker Carlson, for heaven's sakes, and now he's out doing Putin stuff. So I think it's a real worry, but I don't think it benefits any political party because families themselves are worried about this issue, and I don't think it necessarily benefits the Liberals either if they go out there and start hammering Poilievre on it.
What do you think, Tonda?
He's, I think, trying at every turn to make the argument that decisions around education and healthcare should be left to provinces, but that's a bit of a technical argument. And so this week when he finally enunciated a position at least on, you know, the therapies and treatments that block puberty, even that, you know, you can tell that this is tricky because he said for adults. Well, that's not when that treatment is used. And so, you know, look, I think there's a certain amount of public education that really needs to happen so everybody understands exactly what is being proposed. But that Alberta motion is beyond just the gender-affirming surgery. It reaches into, you know, trans people in sport. It reaches into parental consent for sex education classes in schools. And while I think the Liberals are convinced that they ought to speak up and criticize and call out Daniel Smith and Poilievre for whatever tacit support he's given her, the Conservatives, if you talk to them privately, are also happy to have the Liberals talk about that because they don't think that a lot of the mainstream Canadian opinion has kind of formed fully around the Liberal view. And so, look, it's not a vote winner perhaps for anyone, but you can see how it might have an appeal on the one hand, remind some socially conservative voters where they think that their allegiances might go. So it's a very complex thing.
I remember in the fall there was demonstrations pro-trans and anti, and I went to the anti one thinking, oh my, are these going to be these trucker-like people? Well, they were families.
Families.
They were families.
That's my point. That's my point. I think that in what the Conservatives used to call ethnic and cultural communities, there are very small c conservative social values, right? And around this question, I think that some Conservatives think that, you know, they actually coalesce a view there. And so I think it's fraught, and I agree it's divisive, but I can't assume at this point it's a winner for anybody.
Absolutely, and that's a very good point. And I think Mr. Poilievre wants to present himself as the defender of parental rights, the rights of parents to know. And I think you've heard him say that, use that phrase, parents have the right to know. So that's why I think he's reaching out to the kind of protest that Bob described, that there are families. And in the GTA, I think you've got members of the ethnic communities who are very strong values on family values, and that will probably talk to them. But talking about taking away this from the political arena, I'll give you the example in Quebec. The Quebec government, instead of, you know, deciding and legislating or announcing a policies, they set up a committee of wise people, if I may say, 3 people put together, and to recommend options to the government. So they took away the issue from the political arena. And it makes for a debate that is, you know, less divisive as a result than what Daniel Smith did, Scott Moe, or even Blaine Hicks. And those governments now are talking about using the notwithstanding clause to make sure that their policies prevail in case this is contested before the court. So I think the approach by the Quebec government takes away the kind of divisiveness that we're seeing in other provinces.
And I just want to add one other thing. I mean, I don't mean to also suggest that all conservative opinion or strategists are on the same side of this issue either. I think that there are some within the Conservative Party ranks themselves who wonder, is this a wise path to go down, and why talk about it? And they worry maybe if it causes Canadian voters to wonder what the commitment of the party leader is to LGBTQ rights more broadly.
Yeah,
not that he said anything directly on, more broadly LGBT rights.
Although there's still the question as to why even legislate on these matters. Yeah. Why not leave it to other bodies? And it does become this political, because it does become this political football. Yeah. Well, of course, we will keep watching it. You're my wise panel of three, and that went by really quickly. So
we're all in trouble.
I don't know. I like it. Bob, Tonda, Joël-Denis, thank you for the time.
Have a good weekend.
You too.